Yeah, dear colleagues, welcome to today's online lecture hosted by the Hamburger Gesellschaft für Thaiistik in cooperation with the Department of Southeast Asian Language and Cultures at the AAI at the University of Hamburg. And I think this is for the first time in cooperation with the Bernhard Nocht Institute for Tropical Medicine. I'm honored to introduce our distinguished speaker, Jörg Friedrich. Jörg Friedrich is a renowned philosopher, publicist and IT entrepreneur who has profoundly influenced contemporary discussions on artificial intelligence and its societal implications. Born in 1965, he has an academic background in physics, meteorology, and philosophy, and holds a diploma in meteorology and a Master of Arts in Philosophy. Jörg Friedrich's prolific writing spans a range of online print media exploring the philosophical dimensions of our interconnected world. His most recent works include the thought-provoking The Post-Optimistic Society and a critical analysis of AI, degenerated reasons, artificial intelligence, and the nature of thought. Today, Jörg Friedrich will address the challenges posed by AI in the context of low-resource language, focusing on the cultural and societal implications of machine translation, particularly in relation to language that are distant in structure and tradition from English, for example, Thai. This topic is particularly relevant given the widespread use of artificial intelligence during the recent epidemics and pandemic, where clear and accurate communication across language became critical in global public health discussions. Jörg Friedrich's insights have been instrumental in sharing the discourse around the role medical communication and its broader societal implications in the last 4 years especially. His expertise will guide us in understanding the complexities and finding solutions to the issues raised by artificial intelligence interactions with traditional language. Please join me in welcoming Jörg Friedrich to what promises to be an enlightening and thought-provoking presentation. Thank you very much, Jörg Friedrich, to be here with us today.
Yeah, thank you very much for your nice introduction and for the invitation to be here today. I'm very glad to share with you my thinking about the challenges of artificial intelligence systems in the context of so-called low-resource languages. And I will introduce this concept, this notion in this lecture, and will explain what I think what is problematic with the current development. Artificial intelligence is a field of research and development that has been developing and differentiating itself by bit for decades. It has already crept into technologies without really being recognized. At the same time, it always sounded like a utopia or even a dystopia. Intelligent machines that could possibly make their own decisions, that are more intelligent than us humans, that make better decisions. It was a strange tension between that's already reality and that's pure fantasy. But suddenly, from one moment to the next, there it was. When the company OpenAI equipped its large language model ChatGPT with a simple user interface and gave the general public the opportunity to communicate with the system, ask it questions, and get answers that you wouldn't believe were generated by a computer system. ChatGPT is part of the research and development field of natural language processing. That means the area in which the processing and production of natural language is being advanced. This includes speech recognition systems. That means systems that can analyze spoken instructions or questions in particular and trigger corresponding actions, such as those already used by Siri and Alexa, but increasingly also in cars for navigation instructions or telephone control. This also includes dialogue systems for hotlines and websites. Natural language processing also includes machine translation systems that translate texts from one language into another. These forms of natural language processing and generation will play a major role in the healthcare sector in the future. And Jonas Schmidt-Schanazit mentioned it before. They will lead to people describing symptoms, for example, to an AI system from which the system will then derive diagnosis or even treatments. The systems may also be able to provide healthy lifestyle advice. From an ethical and medical point of view, there can be major concerns about these possibilities, but that is not the point here for my presentation. In any case, AI systems will soon be helping doctors to turn dry facts into an easy-to-read text that patients can understand, perhaps even in various stylistic forms, in so-called simple language or more intellectually sophisticated language. You know that in journalistic contexts, if you have the results or the facts, the pure facts of a football match, for instance, you can give it into such a systems and get back a good or more or less good reportage about this play. And we can imagine that we also have medical facts from an analysis from the blood, and then you can expect that you can put it in such a text to read it and to give the patient some context, some background. Is it good? Is it bad? Is it too high, too low, and so on. However, all these options will be available in very different ways in different countries over the next few years. And they will perhaps often be most difficult to introduce where they are most urgently needed. This is not because the financial and technical possibilities there are more limited than in Europe or North America, for example, but for reasons that lie at the heart of the structure of these systems. That is my main issue here. Now, the so-called, I have to say some words about artificial intelligence and how it works. Now, so-called artificial intelligence is not really intelligent. What is intelligence are the people who devise the systems and develop the many ideas that ultimately enable the huge computer systems to perform the feats that ultimately amaze us. What enables AI systems to process and to generate natural language is statistics. The difference between human intelligence and AI could not be greater if you look at how different the actual performances of humans and machines are. When a human learns to write a good essay, for example, they don't need many sample texts. We learn how to structure an essay from a few dozen essays. We may not be able to name the rules, but we can apply them and vary them creatively. We realize that we like one formulation and the other doesn't seem so successful. We might talk to others about it and see how they react. It is the same when we learn to communicate clearly, to explain something, to answer questions. Although it also takes a single person quite a long time to acquire these skills, this is not because they are not as intelligent as a computer, but because they are learning many other things at the same time. Playing football, foreign languages, cooking food, dancing, getting to know other people, falling in love, and so on. Computer systems are highly specialized and are trained for exactly one task. Even if the so-called large language models can be adapted very well to special tasks through skillful tuning, they will, of course, never achieve the variety of skills that we humans can develop and continue to develop, whereby the different skills of humans are also complement each other. We humans are also assessed quite easily where we can apply what we have learned, even if we are moving into unfamiliar territory. We recognize parallels to the familiar in the unknown and can, with all due caution but creatively, apply knowledge and skills to new situations and learn immediately from experience. We can learn a great deal from a single further experience for all future attempts in the new field. I want to give you another example from the very last days. There was a report that AI systems helping programmers, software developers in solving problems, but only in solving problems they are known for in the last years. AI systems can solve problems that are solved from real people, from real software developers in the last days. They can put them together, they can make statistics over solved problems, and then they can generate from the same class of problems a solution for a single developer, which is always solved by a lot of programmers. And you can find this solution by statistical, by the statistics, if you want to say, by the statistics of the system. But if it comes to a new problem, a new programming problem, the human software developer can also solve this problem because of his experience, but the AI system cannot. A simple example, which is important for understanding my further considerations, will explain this. Perhaps you remember what it was like when you learned to write, or you accompanied your children as they learned. The whole thing happened in writing context the child already knew beforehand, that these strange lines on the paper form something from which you can read stories. You know that a child, before it learned to read, it experiences his mother or father or grandfather or so reading a story from a book, and it sees that there are some lines and they can read a story from these lines. So the children know that these lines and these symbols, these strange lines, has a meaning. Yes. And then they come to read by themselves, and you say, pointing on the second symbol of my example here, you say, this is an A, an A. I want to say it in German because of my example on the next slide is a German example. You will see it. It's an A. And the first one and the third one are Ms. And then it follows an A. And this together is mama. So you can imagine that the children seeing these examples here, these 4 symbols, learn from one case how to see an A, how to learn that this is an A, and the other one, this is an M. Although the symbols are different. In my study, as I studied physics and meteorology in the 1918s, I had a colleague, when I wrote my diploma, I had a colleague who studied, or he created first text recognition systems on the basis of neural networks, what today is what we call today artificial intelligence. And we had to paint or to write book such symbols here for him to train his systems. We had to write a symbol and then had to write there with our keyboard. This is an R, and he said, write it very clear, write it very good, and not so much differences, please, because it is very difficult to distinguish between the first and the second, and it's the same difficulty for the system to distinguish between the first and the third. But for the children, for the child, it will be clear that the first and the third are M, and the other ones are R's. So we need only a few examples to learn this, because we see the meaning, we have a goal, we have, for us, it's connected to the word mama and to the possibility to can read texts and so on. And so we learn one letter after the other and learn it quicker and quicker. Now show the child this German letter with the 2 dots, and you say this is an A. Maybe the child will say this is a funny A, but you say no, there are 2 dots and therefore it's an A. And this is enough for the child to learn the difference between A and A. For the computer system, for the neural network, for the artificial intelligence, these two are 2 completely different letters, symbols, and they have to learn the A from the scratch. They see no similarities or so, and you cannot say it's an R with 2 dots. This is has no meaning for the artificial intelligence system, and this we have to keep in mind when we think about how the artificial intelligence systems work. Children always learn to read in a meaningful context. They want to be able to read. They learn how to write with the letters, how to read, what words and sentences are. They learn about stories. As soon as a child learns another language, which may now contain different letters, it builds on what it has already learned. It learns differences and similarities and connects them. They realize that English is similar to German, but Thai is completely different. They can learn the other because they understand the difference. You can say English is nearly the same as German. You have this word, have a look, there's nearly the same word, but there is a difference and so on. And Thai and other languages are completely different. You have to learn from the scratch. You have to read it in a very different way. And this is for the learner, it is an important information. And it helps learning. They can learn the other because they understand the difference. Again, relatively few examples are enough to learn the foreign language. You know, relatively few is maybe a complicated notion here. We need much, but much lesser than AI need. For an AI system to provide comparable performance, it needs gigantic amounts of data in comparison. This is because AI does not categorize anything in knowledge or understanding system. The large language model sees no sense, no connections. It does not understand that the A is an R with 2 dots on it. It needs just as many images of an A, where the information A is repeatedly added, as it does for the R. An R that is a little further to the left on the image. Remember my example with the word mama. For the AI, these are initially 2 completely different images. The AI is a sophisticated statistical system that can calculate the probability of a new image, matching the label R from many images labeled as R. This is the reason why large language models need vast amounts of labeled data with which they are trained. how they say. For example, if you want to have a dialogue system in which the AI gives meaningful answers to questions, you first need to have entered a gigantic amount of good answers to questions into the system's memory. The system then calculates what is probably the best answer to a question. This is a bit simplified. It's just to demonstrate the principle. Another example. If you want to train an AI system to translate a text from one language to another, you first need a huge amount of texts from both languages that you know have the same content. One text is, so to speak, the label of the other. You could say that the system learns in a large number of attempts to output one text as an answer when presented with the other text as a question. The AI system does not understand what is in one text or in the other. It has no native language. It knows nothing about words that have a similar meaning. It is therefore also unable to paraphrase a fact in the target language if it does not have the right word. It can simply derive the answer that is most likely to be the correct one from the statistics that it has learned through an extensive training process. The major task we face when we want to train an AI system for a specific purpose is the provision of such volumes of data for training. This is why the AI systems that impress us so much today only became conceivable after gigantic amounts of text were accumulated in a networked storage system available worldwide. This networked system is the internet. And the texts are available in it are the training data linked to a large number of trainers. These are real persons. They look at the answers and say good answer, bad answer, and so on. People who actually keep evaluating the results generated by the AI until they are suitable. At this point, we can already see that there is a problem with the database for training when we look at different languages. Of the approximately 7,000 languages spoken worldwide, only a few dozen are available on the internet on an extent that makes it easy to train large language models. These include English and Mandarin, of course, but also Spanish, German, French, and so on. The others are so-called low-resource languages. They are not spoken by very few people. They are just not available on the internet as text to the extent that would be necessary. And here you can add also other digital libraries you can maybe use. Yes, you can have digitalized books and so on, and newspapers and things like that. But this is not comparable to what is available on English or German or Spanish or Mandarin. For example, to develop a translation system based on current AI technologies, you train it with parallel text from two languages that are known to have the same content. For this to work relatively well, it is not only necessary for many such parallel to text exist, it is also very helpful if the language have parallel structure, so to speak. I have shown here, I hope you can see it better than me because it's a little bit small, an example. I have the English sentence, I wish you a lot of happiness on your birthday. It is the Google translation of Ich wünsche dir zum Geburtstag viel Glück. And you know that you can compare English sentences with German sentences, and you see, okay, there are some differences, but you can apply a connection from I to ich, from wish to wünsche, from you to dir, and a lot of, okay, this is a lot of happiness is at the end in German viel Glück, but on your birthday is before. But these are differences you can understand. You have to keep in mind that the AI don't see these mappings or so. It's not necessary. But if you remember my example with the training data for the letters, you can imagine that if you have people who write the R in nearly the same form, then an AI system learns very quicker the R, as if you have some, they may a bow on the top of the R and others make other lines there. And so it is with the translation between two languages. If there are patterns, it is for a statistic easier to make a prediction as if there are no patterns, or if the patterns are very complex. And in European languages, you have such patterns, and this helps also. It helps not only the human pupils to learn, but also the AI system. It needs not so much training data. And I have to come back to my manuscript, and I think I have said most of the next paragraph. I want to repeat, between German and English, for example, there are certain differences in sentence structure with regard to the position of subject, predicate, and object, but these differences follow fairly clear rules. Even if you don't understand the rules, you can recognize a pattern of an assignment if you put many texts side by side. The large language model does not recognize a pattern explicitly, but since the pattern exists, it is comparatively easy to make correct transfer from one language to the other from the statistical distribution with a high degree of probability. Another aspect that contributes to the good functioning of such an AI translation system is fairly good match in the field of meaning of the words in the two languages. And here also, the AI system, the large language model, does not know meanings. But if you have fairly good matches of the meanings, then the statistics are, you don't need so much text for good statistics. And you see it here in my example with the word happiness and Glück. You can translate Glück also with luck, and it is another meaning in English. But we have such differences in meanings, and we have such widespread meanings of one word, what we only can interpret from the context. But between English and German, the differences in meanings of words and of phrases and so on are fairly a few, or so to say. There are not so few as we think, and this is also a problem because we will convert to English with using such system. If we think that we can a novel translate by an English novel can translate and not using an artist and translator, but an AI system to translate a novel from English to German, we will fail in translating all the meanings of the novel. So to say another aspect that contributes to the good functioning, I said, the more clearly the word usage matches, the faster a good statistics is created, according to which the correct translation of a word into another language can be found with a high degree of probability, also depending on the context. What has been said here for translating from one language to another also applies to all other tasks that can be given to an AI in connection with natural language processing. What is needed is a really large text corpus that is digitally available and that corresponds very well to natural language, spoken or written. And a good mapping between source and target, not only between one language and the other, but also between written text and spoken speech, for example, when it comes to language assistance. With regard to low resource languages, we need to look at another aspect of current technology development. Many requests to AI language models that are made in a language other than English are translated into English. If you today work with OpenAI, when you write a question in German, it will be translated in English, will processed in English, and the answer will translate it back. And this works well between English and German because of the high amount of data to train the translation part of the model. Therefore, when a dialogue is conducted in English, the results are particularly impressive if the request is made in a European language, even acceptable, but in many other languages, things work very poorly. On the one hand, there is no sufficient text corpus for low resource languages from which an independent language model could be trained. Furthermore, there are also no way of training the large language model sufficiently for translation tasks. There are a number of research projects that are specifically specifically dedicated to this topic and are researching ways to exploit the possibilities of AI for low resource languages. However, the majority of AI research is focused on extending the capabilities of the systems that deal with the languages at the other end, primarily English, and the few dozen languages for which sufficient training data is available. There's also research that is dedicated to mapping English or other European language structures to low resource languages. In this way, the problem of the lack of training data shall be solved, and the difficulty of being able to map languages to each other structurally and with regard to the meanings of text is to be overcome. However, this is always done from the perspective of the international academic research, which has been European-oriented and characterized for many decades. There is therefore a fundamental methodological problem that has been mentioned time and time again in all the aspects described and which cannot be solved by any research that aims to support low resource languages at all. In AI, sorry. All research, including that dedicated to low resource languages, looks at the topic, the issues, and the possible solutions from an European, we can say from a Western perspective, from the point of view of English speakers who have the modern European written language, which is increasingly prevalent in the spoken language as a model for thinking about language at all. We think language is how we in Europe speak. This is the model of the ideal model of language. Let us take this lecture I am giving here right now. The manuscript was first written down in German. Then I had it translated by an AI-supported tool. To ensure that this works well and effectively, I made sure that the sentences are structured quite simply and clearly for a philosopher. I am now reading most of the text aloud so that you, who are able to follow me through a technical medium that reduces me to a news speaker format anyway, can follow along with the well-formulated sentences. Such behavior And many similar cultural techniques ensure that we consider the clearly formulated written word that follows the rules grammar to be the crown of natural language. And all AI systems of the so-called natural language processing algorithms are based precisely on this. However, this language has little to do with natural. Rather, it is a highly artificialized language. Natural would mean that the way the thing has grown by itself, according to its origin and nature. However, our modern European language has become a system through norms, rules, and media-mediated standardization, which has been reshaped and consciously shaped by external pressures such as economic and political influence. Just think of the current endeavors to create a gender-equitable language. Natural language also involves breaking of sentences, restarting them, only hinting at something and not finishing it. It also includes hesitation, skipping, and rephrasing. Strictly speaking, natural language does not adhere to grammatical rules. This is not a disadvantage, rather it makes spoken language richer. It conveys much more meaning, emotions, uncertainties, wishes, and fears that language and that adheres to the rules of European written language can. And you see it in my lecture here. When I go from back from my manuscript and speak like now to you directly, you see my language is not so clear, not so rule oriented. It is not grammatical correct, but maybe because I speak directly to you and I think, okay, can they understand what I say and so on, and I make a pause and repeat and so on, then maybe you understand it easier what I say when I speak really natural to you as I read my manuscript from my word processing system here on my screen. But if I would speak only without my manuscript, it would take 2 hours or 3 to say the same thing, and therefore it's better to stay at my manuscript. If we now think of human communicating with an AI language system, then even in the case of a European language, such as English or German, which has a large amount of digital training data from both written and spoken text, it becomes clear that much of the information contained in the spoken words is lost. Consider, for example, a chat system that takes a patient's health complaints and processes them for diagnosis or advice. In a personal doctor-patient conversation, the doctor will not only pay attention to the purely linguistic content, but also to how the patient describes his complaints, when he hesitates, how he describes it in certain phrases, for example, sharp pain. Quite apart from this, the doctor will also observe the patient and keep an eye on the facial expressions and gestures. All of this together provides the doctor with an overall impression that an AI system at the current state of the art cannot obtain. And even if future systems could do this in principle, the question remains as to where the training data for this could come from. So, when we talk about natural language processing by artificial intelligence, we have to recognize 3 stages in the degeneration of natural language through adaptation to the training requirements of AI. The first already concerns English. Natural language is reduced to written language that conforms to the rules. Firstly, the training data are essentially and mostly grammatically correct text. You will say, okay, the text from the internet are not grammatically correct, but they are more correct than our spoken words in our everyday life. Even if they are not provided in written form, but also as audio files for training. If you would use my lecture here, your the audio file of my lecture, if you would use it to train an AI system, it would mostly have grammatically nearly correct forms and so on as written English. All the special features of natural oral language are lost. The sounds, the moods, the mutual interruption, the hesitation, pausing, restarting, and of course, facial expressions, gestures, and body language. Dialects and regional characteristics of the language are also lost. The second is a mapping of non-English texts into English. On the one hand, it involves a simplification or linguistic constructions and a reduction in vocabulary, which are intended to ensure that the back and forth translation is as unproblematic as possible. And on the other hand, a sharpening of the meanings of the words, to put it positively, whereby word meanings tend to converge with the English term, and colorful meanings in other languages are lost. You can see this as an example. I am a fan of the BBC series Doctor Who, and the new season of Doctor Who appears in a lot of languages at the same time. When it comes to BBC, the same day it's on Disney Plus in, I think, 10 languages or so, translated and spoken by native speakers. And I don't know if they use an AI tool to translate the dialogues or if they have translators, but the point is, if you compare this new season with earlier seasons, the amount of interesting word plays, playing with words between them and so on, and interesting formulations are lost. You have very simple, and the director of the series say it is very simple. The stories are simple, the sentences are simple, the dialogues are very simple, and you think, okay, it was better before. Also in English, when I have seen it in English, I have problems to understand the dialogues in the fast dialogues, but it was funnier to see the series. If you now see it in English or German, you can understand both very good, but it's a very simple language. And I think it's an example what we have to expect in the future from such translation systems. The third is an exacerbation of the second problem in languages that are far removed from English and have a completely different logic. This can lead to an alienation between everyday language and expert language. We have such alienation all the time, but it will be the next step. While everyday people continue to cultivate their language habits among themselves, internationally oriented experts will switch to a language that uses the words of their mother tongue. They think they speak in their mother language, but uses them in a way that is predetermined by the English of the language models. This will lead to communication, because you have to see that you think you have the translations. You can speak in your mother language, but it is more English. It is in English German, or a German English, or a Thai English maybe in the future. And you don't feel it, because you speak all the time in your mother tongue. If you go now to English, you know it's a foreign language. But if you speak this degenerated mother language so that the AI systems can easily translate it, then you think you speak your own language, but in fact, it's more in English masked by your mother language. This will lead to communication difficulties between experts and lay people, for example, between doctors and patients, which will no longer be facilitated by technical terms and English specialist text alone, as has been the case in the past, but by the fact that the experts class in the society will consider their language, internationalized by artificial intelligence, to be the normal, correct language in all areas, including in everyday communication, in discussions about sport or political issues, but above all, in the area of communication between experts and lay people. Clearly, you have this development in the past, this alienation between experts and elites and the so-called normal people also in the past. But it will be exacerbated. With these difficulties in mind, which are already significant for the use of AI systems in communication in English or German, for example, in health counseling, we now turn our attention to the situation in areas of the world where so-called low resource languages are spoken. Initially, the use of AI systems seems promising here. For example, dialogue systems, whether text chatbots or acoustic systems, could prepare diagnoses, answer queries, provide assistance, and give information on medication and therapies in the event of uncertainty, even in remote areas. AI-based translation tools can also provide information in various local languages or dialects, and in the event of a lack of reading skills, could present this information as spoken words. It is also conceivable that experts from all over the world who speak different languages could analyze a patient's symptom description and exchange information with each other. For example, a specialist from the Bernhard Nocht Institute for Tropical Medicine could speak directly to a patient anywhere in the world, ask their questions in German, the AI system translates them into the local language, the patient answers in their native language, and the expert receives an answer back in German. For the reasons mentioned above, this is probably still a long way off for many low resource languages. The training data for the large language models remains meager. I learned this word in my lecture here from the translation. Meager. For the majority of the 7,000 languages, even through Google intends to expand its translation service to 1,000 languages. On the one hand, this means that areas of the world that are structurally disadvantaged will remain disadvantaged. On the other hand, however, it is also questionable whether the systems will really achieve what they claim or promise to achieve. Even if there is training data for translation between English and Thai, for example, this will initially and for a long time to come be limited to factual, clearly structured text from the political, scientific, and social spheres. It is highly questionable to what extent conversations between doctor and patient, between a layperson and an expert about health complaints, symptoms and treatment options, or correct behavior in relation to an illness can be reasonably depicted at all. If at least the tone of voice, gestures, and facial expressions cannot be observed, there is a high risk of misunderstanding. This danger remains high when emotional expressions and feelings of suffering are concealed or are not recognized or misinterpreted due to cultural differences. And you have to keep in mind that you think you can speak due to the AI system, you can speak in German and you get an answer back in German, but the facial expression on the other side or the emotions and so are culturally very different to what you expect, and so you can't interpret in the right way what you get as an emotionless AI-generated German answer. However, working with large language models that are primarily oriented towards English language, even if they can produce output in low resource languages, will alienate communication between lay people and experts as a rule. It is to be expected that this technology will mean a further step on the way to experts worldwide thinking in English, so to speak. They think in their mother language, but it is a kind of English, even if they speak in their native language, which means that they will move further away from the everyday language of their home country in their expert language, even if they think they speak this language. This difference, which is becoming a chasm, an abyss, already exists today. It means that experts' statements are becoming increasingly incomprehensive to lay people, especially where the distance to English is great. What is also noticeable in Europe outside the original English-speaking area is becoming a significant problem in other language areas. While in Europe and North America, the use of English directly and in translation is already part of everyday life, and people are therefore able to transfer it into their natural everyday language without any problems, this is likely to be problematic in other regions. This leads to a further alienation between the population who remains closely connected to their natural language in their thinking, speaking, and everyday life, and the elites in the politics, business, and science who are woven even more closely into Western culture via AI-generated translations, albeit without realizing it. Because the AI simulates that it is proficient in all languages. It then apparently also translates into many low-resource languages, but in artificial variations of these, which are structurally mapped onto English. Perhaps you are wondering why I am problematizing all this so much, why I am putting the fascinating developments in the possibilities of AI in such a bad light. Wouldn't it be better to emphasize the opportunities that will arise in the coming decades from natural language processing methods based on large language models? Aren't all the difficulties that I have emphasized here rather teething problems that will be eliminated by the next generation of AI systems and the generations after that? And don't the new possibilities of global communication between experts and lay people all over the world outweigh the disadvantages I have described? Isn't it the usual criticism of the new, the old invocation of the loss of cultural diversity, which has long been heard from culturally pessimistic quarters, that is experiencing a revival in my lecture? Here's what I have to say. I cannot and will not stop the progress that has been made in the field of natural language processing with large language models. As I said, I am using the tools that are being developed myself, and at the very moment I am giving this lecture. But I don't think that that relieves us of the need to pause and think about the unintended side effects, the limitations, and the deformations, some of which are still unknown, that these tools have in the cultures and societies of the world. If we make ourselves aware of these, insofar as they are foreseeable, then we have the chance to drive developments in a direction that mitigates risks, keep difficulties in view, and, as far as possible, preserves diversity or even enables new diversity. Where optimism is high and the joy of new possibilities opened up by AI is exuberant, those who want to pause and admonish may appear to be spoilsports or even regressive. That is the fate of the philosopher. I hope that my reflections have nevertheless been stimulating and enlightening for you. Thank you very much.